Welcome to today's deep dive. Before we jump in, I just want to say to you, our listener, may your day be guided and your week ahead be full of light and purpose. We are so glad you are here with us.
Absolutely. It is great to be diving into this.
So today we are looking at something that honestly reads a bit like a 3,000-year-old real estate contract.
Yeah, that is actually the perfect way to describe it.
Right. We are digging into Numbers chapter 34. And we are utilizing the incredibly detailed study notes from two comprehensive Portuguese Bibles, the Holman and the NAA editions.
Which are both fantastic resources for this kind of historical text.
They really are. So our mission today is to unpack the exact ancient borders of the Promised Land and the specific people chosen to divide it. Because, it begs the question, why do these exact ancient GPS coordinates actually matter to us today?
Well, it is because this text forces us to look at how a really abstract divine promise collides with the very messy, on-the-ground reality of human history.
Messy is definitely the right word for it.
Oh, completely. Because on the surface, this chapter just reads like a dry surveyor's log. I mean, it is a dense list of geographic markers, dry riverbeds, regional boundaries.
So names we can barely pronounce.
Exactly.
Sure.
But beneath that surface, we are actually looking at this incredible masterclass in ancient diplomacy and, the actual mechanics of how you materialize a grand vision.
I love that collision between the divine and the dirt, because we are moving past the sweeping theological poetry here and getting down to the nitty-gritty.
We really are.
So to understand how they plan to govern this land, we have to look at the lines drawn in the sand. And the text starts us off in the south.
Right, the southern border.
Yeah, so it kicks off at the wilderness of Zin, and then it stretches down to the Salt Sea, which we know as the Dead Sea.
Yeah.
Then it climbs the ascent of Akrabim and pushes over to the Brook of Egypt.
And I want to jump in right there, because the Holman study notes highlight something crucial about that Brook of Egypt. They identify it as Wadi El Arish.
Okay, Wadi El Arish. Why is that specific spot so important?
Well, it is a massive, natural, dry riverbed in the Sinai region. When you are drawing a national boundary in the ancient Near East, you don't just, draw an arbitrary line on a map.
Right, you need something physical.
Exactly. You look for undeniable geographic markers that basically serve as natural fortifications.
It makes total sense. And then from there, that southern line finally hits the Great Sea, the Mediterranean,
Right.
which acts as this unmistakable, massive blue wall for the entire western border.
It is the ultimate natural barrier.
It really is. But if you look closely at the geographic breakdown of that southern line, the geometry of it tells a very specific story.
Yeah, it does.
Because it is not just a straight line from the Salt Sea over to the Mediterranean. It features this very deliberate, sweeping curve.
And the Holman notes are brilliant on this point. They highlight that the boundary specifically traces the outer edge of Edomite territory.
Wait, so they are intentionally steering clear of Edom?
Yes, exactly. They are actively avoiding any incursion into Edomite land. And this takes us back to a previous encounter in the narrative.
Oh, right, when they asked for passage?
Right. The Israelites, moving as this massive displaced population, had previously asked the Edomites for safe passage through their territory. And the Edomites firmly, with the literal threat of military force, denied them.
So they basically said, do not even step foot on our lawn.
Pretty much. So tracing this border around Edom is an act of extreme pragmatism.
It is like drawing a property line specifically to avoid a grumpy neighbor's yard.
That is a perfect analogy. You have this invading force claiming a divine mandate to occupy a region, but they are simultaneously executing this highly diplomatic maneuver to avoid a two-front war.
Geopolitical zoning, basically.
Exactly. You are staking your claim, but you are specifically angling your fence line to avoid the heavily armed hostile territory next door. It just shows an awareness that this divine promise has to exist in a neighborhood where the neighbors are already established and, well, highly defensive.
It is very practical urban planning for the ancient world.
It anchors the whole text in historical realism. These borders weren't drawn in a vacuum.
Right.
They had to navigate around existing sovereignties. But, the narrative actually changes drastically when we move to the northern and eastern frontiers.
Okay, let's trace those lines then. So moving north, the text pushes the border way up to Mount Hor. And I know the notes clarify this isn't the southern Mount Hor where Aaron died.
Right. Definitely not. This is likely Jebel Akkar, much further north.
Okay, so up to Jebel Akkar, then it extends over to Leba Hamath near the Orontes River, cuts east down to the Sea of Chinnereth, which is the Sea of Galilee, and then follows the Jordan River all the way back down to the Dead Sea to close the loop.
And that eastern border along the Jordan River offers a really striking geographic reality.
Oh, the math on this is fascinating.
It is. The Holman notes detail it beautifully. If you draw a straight line down the Jordan from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea, the direct distance is about 95 kilometers.
Okay, 95 kilometers.
But the river itself is this chaotic, winding system of curves and switchbacks. So navigating the actual river journey covers 160 kilometers.
Wow. So the divine promise is the 95-kilometer straight shot, but the human execution is the 160 kilometers of muddy, unpredictable switchbacks.
Exactly. And that metaphor brings us to maybe the most startling revelation in the NAA's study notes regarding this whole northern expansion.
The territory stretching up into modern-day Lebanon and Syria.
Yes. The NABA notes point out a stark historical reality here. Israel never fully occupied this massive, ideal territory during the late Bronze Age.
Wait, really? Never.
Never. During that era, roughly 1550 to 1200 BC, they just did not hold those northern extremes. The map detailed here in Numbers 34 is an ideal boundary.
Okay, hold on. I have to push back hard on this.
Go for it.
If they never fully occupied it, and the geopolitical landscape of the late Bronze Age completely prevented them from holding those northern extremes, I mean, aren't we just looking at a theological excuse for a military failure?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Like, is this map a literal divine promise, or is it more of a divine vision board, an ancient nation's geopolitical wish list that they just retroactively framed as a promise?
And that tension right there is the central theological puzzle of this whole chapter. How do we reconcile a divine promise with these historical realities?
Yeah, how do we?
Well, to understand it, we have to look at how ancient texts often function. Establishing an aspirational or ideal boundary wasn't about moving the goalposts to excuse a failure. It was about defining the ultimate perimeter of the mandate.
Okay, I see.
The promise provides the maximum potential of the gift, but the actual realization of that promise is fundamentally a collaborative effort with human agency.
So, meaning the map sets the parameters, but it doesn't guarantee the timeline.
Exactly.
It doesn't bypass the requirement for human competence.
Precisely. The tension between the already promised and the not yet fully realized is entirely intentional. The ideal boundary was set, but actual possession required sustained obedience, military strategy, and really generational resilience.
And they fell short of that ideal.
They did, and the NAA notes don't shy away from that. The text uses that tension to teach the reader that progress almost always involves navigating that frustrating space between an ultimate goal and our present limitations.
Wow. So it is like you are handed the architectural blueprints for this sprawling estate.
Right.
But you still have to secure the supply chains, lay the foundation, and physically build the structures over decades. The blueprint isn't a lie just because the house isn't built yet.
That is a great way to look at it. It is the trajectory.
Right. And speaking of building the house, that trajectory creates an immediate administrative crisis, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Because once you establish the exterior boundaries, even if they are aspirational, you still have to figure out how to govern the interior.
Right. Who actually gets to draw the internal lines? Because you have this massive population of nomadic tribes transitioning into a settled agrarian society.
And if you don't have an ironclad system for dividing that land, you're guaranteeing a civil war over the most fertile parcels.
Which perfectly explains why the text suddenly pivots here. It goes from drawing maps to naming a very specific delegation committee.
Yes. Math, maps, and MVPs.
Exactly. Figuring out who draws the internal fences requires a blend of spiritual authority and deep tribal representation. So the text assigns the overarching division to Eleazar the priest and to Joshua.
And that pairing is critical.
Yeah.
You have Eleazar representing the spiritual and institutional continuity of the priesthood,
Right.
and then Joshua represents the civic, military, and strategic leadership following Moses. Dividing the land is treated as both a theological sacrament and a state-building exercise.
But they don't do it alone. They are joined by one appointed leader from each tribe.
Well, almost every tribe.
Right. The math requires a quick clarification here. We are actually only looking at 10 tribal leaders, representing 9.5 tribes.
Yes.
Because the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh had already settled on the east side of the Jordan River, totally outside the borders we just traced.
Their territory was already secured, so they recused themselves from this specific committee, which leaves Eleazar, Joshua, and 10 tribal leaders to handle the west side.
Okay, so we have this list of 10 names.
And this brings us to just an incredible piece of structural insight from the NAA notes. Because when you read this list, it is so easy to just glaze over them as an archaic roll call.
Oh, for sure. It is just a wall of difficult names.
But they are not listed arbitrarily.
Right. They aren't listed alphabetically, and they aren't even listed by the age or seniority of the leaders.
Exactly. The NAA notes reveal that these leaders are listed in a strict, deliberate geographical order, tracking straight from the south to the north.
Wow.
So the text itself functions as a map. By just reading the order of the committee members, you are actively tracing the future settlement of the land.
That is brilliant. In an oral culture, the administrative roster literally doubles as a mnemonic device for the national geography. The document is the map.
It is brilliant.
Yeah.
But within that highly structured south-to-north system, there's a glaring anomaly.
Yes, the notes point this out, and it is fascinating. If the list is strictly adhering to south-to-north geography, the tribe of Simeon, whose territory ultimately sits the furthest south, should absolutely be the first name on the list.
They should be.
But instead, the tribe of Judah is listed first. The text intentionally breaks its own geographical pattern.
And to understand why it breaks the pattern, you have to look at the specific individual representing the tribe of Judah. Judah is represented by Caleb.
Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He fundamentally alters the architecture of the text.
He really does.
To grasp the weight of his name appearing first, we have to look at the historical context. Caleb isn't just some regional manager. He is like a fantasy draft MVP.
He absolutely is.
Yeah.
He, alongside Joshua, is the only surviving member of the original reconnaissance mission from 4 decades prior.
40 years ago, he crossed into this exact territory as a spy.
Yes.
He assessed the fortified cities, saw the sheer scale of the opposition, and returned with a minority report saying, "We can take this land."
And the rest of the nation completely succumbed to fear. That failure of nerve resulted in 40 years of wandering in the desert.
The entire previous generation passed away in that wilderness?
Every single one of them, except Caleb and Joshua. Caleb is the sole voice of unwavering faith, who literally outlived the consequences of his generation's failure.
So this administrative system is entirely logical, mapping south to north until it encounters a man whose personal history of faithfulness is just so undeniable that the system bends to honor him.
It is a stunning intersection of bureaucratic geography and personal character.
He earns his spot at the top of the list.
Because it demonstrates that the architecture of a nation isn't just built on property lines or natural boundaries. It is built on the credibility of its leaders. The text structurally bows to Caleb's integrity.
Wow.
Because think about it. You can draw the most pragmatic, conflict-avoidant southern borders in the world, and you can outline the most expansive, ideal northern frontiers. But if you entrust the division of that land to leaders who lack the courage to actually occupy it,
The blueprint just remains theoretical.
Exactly.
Which circles back perfectly to our initial question. We started by asking why a dense 3,000-year-old list of GPS coordinates and names holds any relevance for us today.
And the takeaway for you, listening right now, is that the relevance lies in the mechanics of realization. Numbers 34 is a masterclass in holding the tension between grand visions and gritty realities.
Yeah.
It shows us how to navigate around the Edomites of our own lives, when to push forward and when to pragmatically angle the fence line. And it reminds us that true leadership, like Caleb's, stands the test of time.
It really forces us to grapple with the reality that our ideal goals often take generations to achieve. It is a journey of 160 winding kilometers rather than a 95-kilometer straight shot.
It is so true.
And I want to leave you with this final indelible image of Caleb. Consider the arc of this man's life. 4 decades ago, he was a young man sneaking through the brush of this territory, gathering intelligence, looking at the fortifications, and holding on to a promise that literally everyone around him abandoned. And now, as an elder statesman, he stands at the head of the table. He isn't just receiving a parcel of land, he has been appointed as the chief architect tasked with drawing the borders of its future.
Because the waiting wasn't a delay. It was the forge that prepared him to handle the weight of the promise.
Exactly. How does a lifetime of waiting, of holding on to conviction while wandering in the desert, change your appreciation for the promises you finally get to step into? Something to chew on as you go about your week. God blesses all the listeners.